Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We're glad you joined us for another presentation of the Sustainable Leadership Presentation Series, Empowering Leaders for a Sustainable Future. I'm Julie Diegel, Director of Sustainable Business Programs of WasteCap, Nebraska. I'm excited because we're going to be treated to the ideas and wisdom of Adam Hammes, a fearless and humble friend and colleague who has something special to share with all of us today. This series is brought to you by WasteCap, Nebraska, Community College, Metropolitan Community College, and the Joslyn Institute for Sustainable Communities. WasteCap Nebraska is a statewide member-based nonprofit organization building zero-waste communities in Nebraska by working with community and business leaders. We help community leaders identify zero-waste policies, programs, and infrastructure suitable for their community and provide assistance to business entities for achieving zero waste and other sustainability goals. Our goal is to eliminate waste in Nebraska. If you have any questions during the presentation today, you can tweet to hashtag SLPS Thursday, all one word, no spaces, or enter into the chat box in WebEx, or give your questions to the staff person in the room to communicate to our speakers. Those of you who will be typing in the chat box, raise your hand. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Adam Hammes. Adam was raised on a farm in southeast Iowa. He holds a BA in Human Services with minors in Environmental Studies and Business from the University of Northern Iowa. He earned his MBA with a focus on social and environmental performance from Maharishi University of Management. Adam holds professional certifications including Lead AP, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, Life Cycle Assessment, Global Reporting Initiative, Training for Transition, the National STEP, and more. He has launched dozens of community initiatives, including a Sustainable Spring Break, Transforming Business Speaker Series, the annual Hope for the Hungry Local Foods Conference, a local zip car sharing program, Solidarity Microfinance for Women in Poverty, and more. Adam led Come and Go to become the only convenience store certified in LEED volume program and organized a new committee to create the first Energy Star category for convenience stores. Also at Come and Go, he created a new at-the-pump recycling program, managed energy and water efficiency retrofits, piloted alternative fueling stations, designed marketing and communications programs, developed strategic plans and metrics for reporting, and championed social and philanthropic initiatives to build a company's brand. Adam has taught as an adjunct business faculty member for William Penn University.
We seem to have lost Julie's audio, so Adam, with that, you get a shortened bio today, and we're going to let you take it away. We're really excited that you're here.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll get Julie back. I wanted to express my gratitude for everybody, all the sponsors of this program, Sustainable Leadership Presentation Series, WasteCap, Nebraska, the Metropolitan Community College, Joslyn Institute.
We're excited to bring this live presentation from Iowa.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to these things, and so I keep doing them. So thank you so much for having me here. And also thanks for everyone who's on the webinar today. I do think that if you don't see it today, that you're a pretty special individual who rearranged your schedule, your family, your work to be at a webinar series called Sustainable Leadership Presentation Series. And I think that you'll find throughout the presentation that my main goal is to make sure that you get out of this presentation something valuable so that you can take it and use it and have an impact on those people who weren't able to be at this type of presentation or at this type of webinar series, because we do have a lot of things that people are passionate about that we need to solve today. So I think the housekeeping that I wanted to cover and I've been asked to cover, Julie touched on, but we have a lot of people listening in a lot of different ways, and so my goal is to make sure that the rooms, anyone sharing from a room where there is a facilitator, that you know that you can participate by either speaking to the facilitator and having them type in your question or your comment. That's important because I do want to have you engage in participating, because my story is really not that important unless it evokes something in you and it brings up some stories for you that you can work with. And then if you're an individual at your computer that you can type into the chat box. I particularly won't be able to see it because I'm running the slideshow, but Minetta, the host, will be able to see those, and I'll stop at periodic breaks to make sure that we check in on any comments and questions along the way. So the Q&A is going to happen throughout the presentation and at the end a little bit, but definitely don't hesitate to ask or comment during the presentation. And that's really how you can participate to get the most out of it, and I'll encourage you to do that all along the way. All right, let's go to the slideshow. So sustainable advocacy is the title of the presentation. Leverage your emotions, avoid burnout, and influence for good. I have written a book about it, and I'm very passionate. This is what I love to speak about, and I'll tell you why. But first I wanted to ask everyone in the room, to ask yourself, are you an advocate? Is that something you've asked yourself? And I want you to practice now talking to your facilitator, typing into the chat box so our host can make sure that everyone knows how to get engaged, and really say, how am I an advocate in my life? And I'll give you some examples because it varies, and people, you may have not used that term, but you probably advocate for a lot of things that you're passionate about, that mean something to you, that you really care about in your life, all the way from small things like in my family. I'm an advocate as a son and a brother that my brother Ross gets good long-term care. He had an infant brain injury. He's been that way his whole life, and it's something that we really have to put together, and I advocate for that, and it's not always easy because it's a sensitive topic. So who's going to take care of my brother? And I'm an advocate that he is taken care of. I'm an advocate for a garden at every school. It's a project that I've been working on for over a year. I'm an advocate that farmers and environmentalists work together and have a positive collaborative relationship in Iowa around water quality. It's a project I've been working on daily. I'm an advocate that sustainability champions like you, in whatever form that takes, are effective and productive and are not burning out, so that you stay active and engaged in whatever you're working on. And I also advocate that all business students leave university understanding sustainability and how to apply it to business. All these examples. So I want you to type in, and I'll ask Minetta to read some of the suggestions or the answers that people have commented. So just give us a taste of who you are and what you're up to, and that way everyone will know that they're on the call with some pretty important people who are up to some pretty important things. So Minetta, I'll give everyone a minute to type in, and then I'll let you read some of those to the group.
Okay, we've got some coming in here. I'm an advocate for finding, they're going to move while I read, creative ways to minimize food waste at home and in the business. A climate change advocate, zero waste advocate. I advocate for a world where everyone can thrive now, right now, and for 7 generations to come. Advocate to eliminate red meat on one's diet. One person in our room is an advocate of survivors of violence. Sustainability recycling advocate. This is a typo, so let's see, one becomes an effective, this is a question, how does one become an effective advocate lobbyist? I am a sustainable intern, student, family, and a friend to others. I'm an advocate for peace and understanding. Where others stand, political and economic. I used to advocate for my students who had a serious health condition. I'm an advocate for kids who are affected by HIV, AIDS. And another person has typed in an advocate for food waste reduction. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Another one's an advocate for their children. Going as fast as I can. I think I got them all. Oh, here's another one. I'm an advocate for more bikes and healthy living.
And Minetta, if you can hear me, it's your call on timing. I love the list, but if we need to move on, I think people get the picture. Well, I think that I have the floor again. Minetta, is it okay if I continue?
Sorry, we were having some muting trouble, so if you were talking, I was talking over you because I didn't know that. So yes, please continue. There's more coming in, but let me know when you want me to keep reading.
Okay. I just said that I love the list, and if we needed to continue for timing, it was your call. And so I just wanted to say that I think people are starting to get the picture that it's not a very small, thin strand of what people are focused on. People care about a lot of things and a lot of different scopes and scales. You may not even agree with everything, but I personally, whether you're an advocate for the things that I'm advocating for on this presentation, I just want you to be successful. If you care enough about your community to take a leap and to go out there and try to make a difference, I know that you're going to, and so the best to you. So that list is inspiring to me. Every time I ask the question, it just makes me feel proud that I know and get to share the stages with these kinds of people. So thank you for being an advocate. And I want to tell you that one of the questions I like to ask is, do you get exhausted? Because the reason I wrote my book and I started coaching and blogging about this topic is that I started seeing a lot of smart and passionate friends quitting the field that they were in. It's not easy work to be an advocate. It's not always, emotionally the easiest thing to do. It's not always physically easy to do. We get very passionate. We tend to work long hours and work hard hours on things that we care about. And so think about it. When was the last time you felt really tired? You thought, I might not be able to keep doing this. There are other jobs out there that might pay me better and be easier for me to do. And so I'd take care of my health. And that's why we're going to talk about this topic today, because I want to see you succeed at the things that you advocate for and do it in a healthy, happy way and be successful ultimately. And so one story, I'm going to back up really quick. Just yesterday morning, I had the extreme honor and pleasure of doing the keynote for the Sustainability Summit in Milwaukee that happens every year. And I got to share that honor with Will Allen from Growing Power. And before I even said anything, any words came out of my mouth, I turned to Will and I thanked him for inspiring me. He influenced me. The topic we're talking about is influence. In 2008, when I moved back to Iowa, my home state, one of the first things I saw was a video of Will Allen winning the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award for $500,000 to spread urban farming around the world. And that influenced me to work on an urban farming project that turned into an annual conference on local foods and fighting hunger. It's still going today. And so it was basically an honor for me to be able to step out and see someone 6, 7 years ago who really changed my life and be able to be grateful for that. And at the event in Milwaukee, the University of Wisconsin, I met Dr. George Corliss in the engineering department, and I told him the topic that I spoke about, and he said, oh, my students, my engineering students, we always try to teach them how to communicate their engineering knowledge to people who are not engineers. And he's like, it's a huge thing that engineers struggle with. We've got all this technical scientific knowledge and we can't always communicate it to people. So he said the number one thing that he believed in was knowing your audience. And I think that's right on, and we're going to talk about that today. And what I'm also going to talk about is 2 other things. Knowing your audience, but first knowing yourself, dealing with difficult emotions, then knowing your strategy so that you save yourself time and energy, and then knowing your audience when you actually go out in a very strategic way to make an influence on people and be an advocate. And so those are the 3 things: knowing yourself, knowing your strategy, and then knowing your audience. So the first thing we're going to talk about is leveraging your emotions. And what is very important is to really understand yourself. And so you can go through these processes and deal with these difficult emotions when they come up and use them in a productive way. And an easy way to remember that I like to share with people is the 3 stages of dealing with difficult emotions, and that's polar bear, killer bee, and a sea otter. And so I'm going to jump right in. Polar bear. So if you think about a polar bear from an ecological stance is a vulnerable species. It's what ecologists call a vulnerable species. And they have a limited range where they can be successful in life, and sometimes it's shrinking every day. Outside forces beyond their control tend to be the ones responsible for that, and they tend to look like a victim and be taken as a victim, and they need help from the outside so that they can succeed or they can survive. They're very strong animals, but they definitely, if you look at the way polar bears have been portrayed, they evoke an emotion of sadness, fear for their loss, and things like that. So that stage and what that looks like, I can tell you my story. And from a very early age, where I grew up in a rural farming community in southeast Iowa, I grew up on a livestock farm. I was a little kid running around in the 80s, and my favorite places to play outside were the stream next to our house. We had a huge open field where I ran through the stream beds and the fence rows and the forest. We were on the South Skunk River. And I spent a lot of time outdoors and working on a farm with animals. And the thing that was different about me, or that I felt was very different about me, is that in my large Catholic family that lived in a very small rural community, the word environmentalist was definitely not one in the late 80s that was anything that I strived to be. It definitely was stuff on the news, and the connotation in Iowa at that time was that environmentalists were just bad. And I was a young kid, and so that impression wasn't necessarily the truth. It was just what an 8, 9, 10-year-old starts to think when he hears his parents and his aunts and uncles talking about the word environmentalist. But other things were happening where my neighbor and good friend owned a hog facility, and the side of their manure pit had collapsed and dumped a bunch of manure, and by a bunch I mean thousands of gallons of manure, into the stream that I like to play in. And it was kind of a terrible experience for me because I wasn't allowed to go in the stream for a very long time. There were bulldozing different fence rows and stream beds that I used to like to play in, and those were my childhood memories, and it really bothered me that those things were happening, and I could understand, and it would be explained to me that it's more yield for the farmers, and it's important because we're a struggling economy, but it didn't change the fact that it was really upsetting, and I didn't feel at that time that I was able to express how upset I was as a little kid to my parents or to my sisters and cousins, because to me that made me an environmentalist. And the last thing I wanted to be was an environmentalist as a little kid, because I was positive that that was not a good thing to be, that my parents would be upset at me if those are the types of things that I was into. And I really kind of repressed that, and I kept it down. I didn't share it with anybody, and I just felt like I had to deal with this myself. And so there's a lot of fear of being different, fear of not being accepted, and just sadness that I kind of had to hide some things about myself that I wasn't able to share with other people. So if you notice, from an action standpoint, I really collapsed what I did, which was repress and just react immediately to that and kind of stuff it down, with the emotions that I felt, fear and sadness. And that's not necessarily what you have to do, but as a little kid, that's what I did. And so what I ask you to do is not think about my personal story, but your personal story. What's your earliest memory of being what I call a polar bear? Feeling fear and sadness, possibly fear of not succeeding, fear of being different, fear of having to handle things on your own, not being accepted. And what would that look like for you? What was the earliest sense that maybe you had that? And I will stop here again, and I'll ask people, can you share that into the chat box? Take a few minutes and let Minetta share some of those stories.
Nothing's come in yet, Adam. It's I'm watching it, but it always takes people a few minutes. This is the normal delay. So folks, if you have a response to Adam's solicitation, you can put it in the chat box. And here comes one. Growing up in the Mississippi Delta in the 50s and 60s, definitely felt vulnerable. That's one of them that's come in. Another one says, I definitely can relate to these fears. Another one saying, not being born in America and parents getting a divorce and ending up with a mom who doesn't speak English and no job. I wanted to help her, but I couldn't because I couldn't get a job. When I graduated from college with a technology degree, I had a fear that I wasn't going to get a job. Then I started a family and didn't know how I was going to support them. Being bullied and not knowing how to stand up for myself. Not having parents able to care and provide for me. I felt a similar sadness and loneliness when I saw the native prairies and sandhills where I lived being plowed under and planted with corn by corporations. I too moved back to the Midwest and realized I neither felt like I belonged here nor did I feel like I was called to be far away from my roots. Another one, letting everyone around me down.
And Minetta, can you hear me?
I can, Adam.
Okay. Well, this is one I hate to cut off because, one, I really appreciate and I honor anyone who was willing to share there because, sometimes these aren't the stories that people want to share, and I think they're important, and I'll talk about it in a second, but I know that we have to move on. So I want to thank everybody very much who did type anything in, and if you didn't type it in but you wanted to, I also appreciate and can understand that too. So Minetta, I think we'll move on from here. Is that okay?
That's fine. Sounds great.
Okay. And so I want to, again, be very grateful for your stories and let you know that they're even, these stories, it doesn't stop in childhood. I just had a fear come up when I'm working on water quality in Iowa. In the media, there's definitely portraying Iowa as a very two-sided an argument between water quality of farmers and environmentalists. And I know for a fact that that's not the case, that there's a lot of collaborative efforts. But it's still, when I go to talk to farming organizations, I always fear that even though I grew up on a farm, I'm very close with my family now, I just, there's a fear that's like, I'm going to be seen as not farmer enough. I'm going to be this person that is not even listened to. That never happens, but it's something I have to deal with. Anytime I have an advocacy project that I take on is feeling like, okay, what if I'm not the right person? So I wanted to just discuss that in the polar bear stage, when there's difficult emotions of fear and sadness come up, this is one where ecology and psychology actually use some of the same terminology. And so a good strategy is being able to be vulnerable. And if you've ever read Brene Brown, Daring Greatly, or some of her other books, she writes on vulnerability in a very specific way that I think is really amazing and powerful for people. And I will say that vulnerability is not always what people think it is. It's not being all mushy and just wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's not really long Facebook posts to people you don't know who can't really do anything for you. But being vulnerable is very specific, and it's defined as having a trusted community of people, even if that's one or two people, that know you and can listen to you and will be there and listen to you when you share. And so that it's basically being able to have thick skin like a polar bear in tough situations, but even later that day or later that week, always finding time to go back to your community of trusted people, sharing with them what you're dealing with, sharing with them how you're feeling, and letting them mirror that back to you so that you can hear yourself talk, you can think out your own problems, and you can realize that people aren't going to judge you so harshly. You're a human being. It's okay to have difficult emotions like fear and sadness, and you need to be able to talk through those things. And so being vulnerable is something I recommend. Anytime fear and sadness come up, don't just share with anybody, but find those trusted friends that you get together with. Have your little group, and have it be a trusted group you build over time. Some people call it coaching relationships or masterminds, but that's very professional sounding. Just having really, really good friends that you can trust, not to egg you on and be on your side and hate the other person for you, but to really listen to you and give you some solid advice and just say, hey, I think that you may have some fears that are warranted and some that aren't, or maybe you're sad, but maybe this is actually, you're looking at it in the wrong way. And having those trusted friends is important. So I recommend that as the #1 strategy for dealing with fear and sadness. And then the second stage that often follows is the killer bee stage. And so a killer bee is an invasive species ecologically. It's an outsider. It's a hybrid species that we bred and then got out of captivity and bred in the wild. And the thing about killer bees is that they swarm faster than any other bee. They sting more times than any other bee, and they chase any perceived threat longer and further than any other bee. And they don't even do it from their own hives. They'll come in, they'll take over an existing hive, and they'll implant their own queen. And so they're definitely an outsider in that case. And so if you think about my own story, I left high school, I was a pretty quiet kid. I was quiet because, that's how I got by. When I went to college, I was actually studying management information systems. If you know anything about MIS, it's basically sitting at a computer, making lots of money, but really not talking to anybody. And that sounded all right to me. But something really shifted for me when I got to college, and two things happened. One less important is that I started to be able to be vulnerable. I found some really cool outdoor clubs that I could get out outdoors with, and those outdoor hiking, rock climbing, backpacking, camping groups tend to be a little more environmentally conscious. But they also, when I was in college, my best friend in my freshman year passed away in a motorcycle accident. And so it took something really heavy like that to really kind of shake me out of just being a quiet kid. And the shift really for me was that I got angry for the first time. I was really sad at first, but then I was angry. I was angry at my friend for not wearing a helmet. I was angry at my friend for driving recklessly. I was angry at myself for not spending more time with them before it happened. And then I started getting angry at a lot of things. I was angry at my parents for what I perceived as blaming them for me being a quiet kid and not being able to share how I felt when I was a kid, even though it wasn't necessarily their doing, but it was definitely the way I perceived it growing up. Started getting angry at my professors. The stuff I was getting taught in MIS class didn't seem very socially or environmentally friendly. And so I just became kind of an angry person. And what went along with that was a lot of pride. And so pride tends to follow anger, because the next thing for me to do is, if I was angry about something, I started feeling proud of myself for, for caring more than other people, which was not necessarily true, but I would have that sense of, well, if I know these things, I must care more than you, or I'm smarter because I've been studying these things more than you. And I can tell you that I definitely felt better than being afraid and sad all the time, but I can tell you it also wasn't very productive. I joined a lot of clubs. I was very successful at my jobs, but I didn't necessarily stick around very long. I started traveling because I love to do outdoor recreation. I became a trip leader. And in that particular setting, I was successful because I was teaching people about what I loved. But anytime I got into an environment where it wasn't an outdoorsy, environmentally minded kind of group, it was just me arguing with people. I would argue with my family. I would argue with groups of people that I would go out with, and it was not productive. And I would not say that I was making a huge difference in the world outside of what I would get paid to do, which was lead outdoor trips, teach environmental education. And so I want you to think about in your own life, again, like my story is great, but I want you to think about your story. Where are the times where you kind of shifted and you, for the first time, maybe felt angry about something or started to be very prideful and it didn't go as well as you had hoped, even though that still might have been how you felt, because it's a perfectly valid way to feel. So I'm going to open it up to the group and talk about your killer bee experiences. When did you feel that shift? And Minetta, you've got the chat box.
There's a little bit of a delay always after you give them the cue. There's always a few minutes and then they start flowing in. So nothing's coming yet, but I'm watching it. Okay, we've got some that have come in. When I saw people wasting energy, I got very angry and self-righteous. It's easy to get angry at climate deniers and not understand how they think this way. Feel strongly about border and drug control issues. I've been very politically active and am working to get big money out of politics. Whenever someone says it can't be done, I get angry and feel the need to prove them wrong. Angry as a young adult when started to recognize how lack of parenting as a child carried over into adulthood. I can relate because I also felt it was my parents' fault for my shyness and fearfulness. I don't know what caused the shift, but I'm glad I did not make the shift. I'm glad I did make the shift. Angry at the injustices in the world. I get angry when people attack the things I believe in passionately.
And Minetta, we'll go ahead and move on.
With an educator about fear of the melting ice caps and that person becoming completely upset and suggesting that environmentalists want mass genocide, among many other things. This made me incredibly angry and sad that people take it to that extreme.
And Minetta, can you hear me now?
So I'm going to hand it back to you. Sorry, we are managing several audio feeds here. I'm going to hand it back to you, Adam. I don't remember you telling me how emotional this was going to be. I think that wasn't in your signed speaker agreement. We're going to have to talk after this.
Yeah, and I thank you. We'll talk about it. The emotions that people feel, I think, one, it's not wrong. Anger and pride are feelings that come up, and I think what you want to think about, and just as an adult, I'll tell you that this, I still get angry. I still feel proud sometimes. I try to stay off Facebook because sometimes when I'm in my personal time just trying to relax, it's much easier for me to get triggered because I forget to follow my own advice. But what's really the struggle with anger and pride is when we get stuck there. It's not that anger and pride aren't healthy emotions to express and process, but it's really about, do you get stuck in anger and pride? Because it's not good to be angry and proud as a living or as a way of life or as just being that all the time. And so processing those is really important so that you can move past it to what's next. And it doesn't mean you have to stop doing the things that you love. It just means you want to take the anger and the pride out of it and then work really neutrally with people because this is what you chose to do. It's less of a reaction than it is a choice and a response to things you want to see in the world. And so when you're in anger and pride, it's really critical to think about just getting a mass of people because killer bee mentality, I guess, is really that you are an outsider. Oftentimes you're upset about something that may or may not be in your particular wheelhouse. It may not be your profession. It may not be in the community where you're exactly from. And you want to make sure that you understand that people see outsiders not as someone they want to listen to. And it's really hard to take advice or criticism from an outsider as well. So when you care about something, if you find yourself getting angry and proud, one, share, become vulnerable with the people that you have already built that group with, those strong, close friends. So remember to keep sharing that that's how you're feeling with them. Then also try to align yourself with like a local connected group of people that is from that community or involved in that industry so that you can make a difference as a group of people, because killer bees are extremely successful. That's why we can't seem to stop them in a lot of cases, because they do have a critical mass. And so the key is to be a part of a critical mass that's going to succeed, and that success is going to come from a local or an inside type of job where you're helping groups that really are a lever in that community, or you're using tools that are coming out just in the last 5 to 10 years, becoming really popular and really easy to use, like crowdsourced funding campaigns like Kickstarter or petition sites like change.org. So you're not just one person who's upset about something, you're a part of a very large group of people, a movement that want to see some positive change in the world. And so that's how you get critical mass. The last stage that I want to share with you emotionally is sea otter. And sea otter ecologically is a keystone species. A keystone species, what that means is that just by them existing and the role that they fill in that community, they make the entire ecosystem possible and successful, and they make it possible for all the other organisms in that community to be healthy and succeed. So what that looks like for a sea otter and why they're important is they eat sea urchins. It literally almost comes down to that. They systematically go to the bottom of the ocean and they pick up these little spiny black sea urchins, and they in a very cute manner, lay on their back. They smash them open with rocks and they eat them, and they do that all day long, and then they go to sleep. And they're actually typically looked at as kind of like a cute, lazy animal. But if they didn't systematically go eat the sea urchins off the bottom of the ocean, the sea urchins would multiply. They would eat the holdfasts of the kelp plants, and those holdfasts hold the kelp to the bottom of the ocean, where they then float up to the top, and that creates the entire kelp forest ecosystem where all the fish and other organisms live. So they literally, if the sea otters struggle, the sea urchins explode in population and they destroy the entire kelp forest, which the entire ecosystem depends on. And so it's that systematic role that they fill is why people look at the health of the sea otter and want to see more of them in the community. And so what that looks like for me was I was still kind of doing my killer bee stage, doing a lot of education, but I went back to get my MBA and try to be more successful. I was, looking at different programs and sustainability education programs that I worked for, trying to make them successful. And I learned a lot, first about companies that were doing great things in corporate sustainability, but I also worked for the Cousteau family out on Catalina Island. So Jacques Cousteau's son, Jean-Michel Cousteau, and Jacques Cousteau's marine biologist, Richard Murphy, they trained us every year. And were sitting with us one night at a training program, and I just got a chance to sit across from them and ask them a bunch of candid questions with our staff. And we said, what's working? Like, why do you keep doing this youth education? What do you think we need to do next? And I always remember, Richard Murphy looking across at me, and he said, Adam, it is great that we do this youth education, and there's a whole philosophy that we have to educate our kids, and that's the future. But some people stop there, and he said, you got to accept that that's not the way the world works. Like, if you can't have the courage to go teach adults, the kids that go home to adults who don't care and don't support them aren't able to be self-expressed. They're not able to do the things that we teach them, and they're not interested in fighting their families. And so if we don't have the courage to go out there and accept that just teaching kids isn't good enough, it's not going to make a difference. That was kind of hard to hear, but then we started really talking about okay, how do you reach adults? What kind of organizations do target young professionals and adults? It's hard to get adults educated about sustainability because they're not in school anymore. They're in the workforce. And so I just decided right then and there I was going to go back to Iowa and try my hand at starting a nonprofit organization that targeted young professionals and adults with sustainability education and information, got them plugged into events and organizations, and I did that. It was not easy at all, and I had to learn a lot and struggle, but I moved back to Des Moines, Iowa, and I created a nonprofit called Urban Ambassadors, and that's what we did. We just let people know of all the great things, different environmental, social causes that were happening in the community, and we helped them get connected. We helped employees of companies get connected. We helped young professional groups get connected. And for the first time, I was creating something instead of telling people what I thought we were doing wrong. And it was a really big shift for me to find the courage to create something myself and to accept that sometimes the things I believe aren't necessarily the truth, and I need to just accept things for how they are and then work with them how they are, not how I would hope for them to be. So I want to ask you, like in your situation, wherever you're advocating for, like when was the first time you felt really courageous to go take a stand for something and create something positive in your community and really accept and meet people where they were, not make them wrong for being less educated about a certain topic, not make them wrong for being just where they were in life, but just saying, okay, here's what we're working with. Now how do we make a difference? And Minetta, I'm going to accept the delay and let you take over the chat box and share some more of these stories. And I've really enjoyed all the stories that you guys have been putting into the chat box, so thank you for continuing to share.
Am I off mute? I believe I am. Yes, okay. Adam smiles tell me I can go now. I joined local government committees and learned to listen, finding common ground, interest in language. That's the only one I've received so far. Reviving a nonprofit with a faith community full of challenges. It's very hard, but we keep on working. Assisting and helping local people learn and advocate for bees in their neighborhood. I advocated for a change in an ordinance limiting urban agriculture in the city where I serve. A change in sorry, let me start over. I advocated for a change in an ordinance limiting urban agriculture in the city where I serve in the city government. One of the first major times I've personally felt this was at last month's meeting. Seeing and hearing that I was not the only person with these same concerns made me realize something must be done, and getting out into the community only affirmed this. I learned you get a lot more with honey than vinegar.
And Minetta, they make...
be the end. Nothing else has come in, so I'll give it back to you, Adam.
Okay. Thank you very much. And they may keep coming in, but I know that we need to keep moving on. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And it is true. I think you get more honey with vinegar. It's a cute saying. And I wanted to talk about when you start to feel that you're vulnerable, you're able to have people to share with in your life where you can deal with difficult emotions, you move through, you start finding a critical mass of people to be engaged with and start building, even in those killer bee phases, when you have moments of anger and pride, that I hope that you get to courage and acceptance, because it's a really powerful place to come from, and it really requires you to get good at dialogue with people that think differently than you. It's not always easy to sit and listen to someone who thinks differently than you, but when you can separate the two things, that just by listening to somebody, you're not agreeing with them, and in that same moment, you don't have to turn it into a battle of who's going to win. It could be a battle of who's going to understand the other person sooner, so that you can just really get good at dialoguing and know that at the end of an argument, you don't have to have won or lost, but that you do have to be good at getting in dialogue with people who think differently than you. Otherwise, it's really hard to make a difference in the community, because it's the people who think differently than you that need to be convinced otherwise, or to teach you what is a way you could tweak your program to actually have it help people, kind of like that sea otter, where it makes the entire community better. People who think differently than you are great at giving you ways to adjust your program, tweak at it, come at it from a different angle, and still have the same benefits to the community, but maybe the program didn't look exactly like you thought it needed to look right at the beginning. So I really think dialogue is the mastered skill that has to be done when you move into courage and acceptance. So I want to let you know that in my experience, we're going to move into the second part, which is we just did knowing yourself. I want to talk about knowing your strategy. I'm going to tell you that burnout is so common in the field of advocacy. That's why I'm in this industry doing this kind of talk, writing these kind of books. I want to help people understand from my experience what I went through and what I learned, so that hopefully you can have a strategy that keeps you less stressed, enjoying what you do as an advocate, and actually having more success. So the 3 myths that I want to uncover for you that I experienced, and I thought these things were true, and it was a really easy correction once I learned that they weren't, but it really had me burning out at most of the things that I worked on, is that first off, I thought I had to convince people or influence every conversation that I was in, and that was exhausting. Every time someone talked about a topic that I cared about, which, because I was a quiet bookworm for a living, I knew about a lot of different topics, social, environmental, financial, and every conversation I found myself wanting to correct somebody, wanting to put my own spin on something, push them to go further. I was always advocating for something, even if it wasn't a project I was working on. I was just always inserting myself, and it was completely exhausting. And the reality of the situation was it turned more people off than anything. There were more arguments than me actually helping somebody. And it was clear that I was not doing that for a living. I was just inserting my own opinion. And so when I was able to realize that if I know what I want to focus on, and I know in my community where I want to make a difference, I can pick the conversations and I can focus on the types of people I need to talk to, and every other conversation can be a joy, because I can just listen and I can learn and I can treat it as a way to build a new friendship or build a new network. And I don't have to get this person to do all the little things that I wish they did for a living. All I have to do is understand them, build a strong relationship, and later on I could learn something from them, or I could come back to them if I needed their help. There's a huge stress relief when I realized I don't have to go around and save the world in every conversation that I'm a part of. The second one was in my family. So looking at family and friends, I really believed, I think watching television and seeing people and politicians really get looked poorly on. There's always trying to make someone look bad, of like, well, you're advocating for this, but your spouse isn't, perfect, or your kids aren't perfect, or you joined a group once 10 years ago that wasn't perfect. And I remember thinking like, oh man, I got to get my family and friends to be eco everything and socially socially conscious about everything because that'll reflect poorly on me. And it was kind of an ego thing where, yes, I cared about the subjects, but I really wanted them to adopt some of these practices because I thought if I didn't, it reflected poorly on me. Like I wasn't good enough to influence them, or they didn't care enough about the things I cared about. And it was really distracting, but it was also very draining. My parents and my family, my sister, my brother, my friends, they're the most important relationships in my life, and the women I've dated. And when those things involve me trying to change them and trying to make them different and me relating to them like they weren't good enough, all it did was distract me when I did go to work and had a professional job and a professional advocacy work that I needed to get done. And I was not productive at all, and I was frustrated all the time. And when I was able to give that up and just realize that putting my family first and loving them and accepting them for who they were was the number one thing. And then if they wanted to learn about what I was doing for a living, I was always happy to tell them. It was a huge stress reliever in my life. And I had way better relationships with my dad and my mom, my sister, my brother, and all of my friends that aren't nearly as gangbusters about sustainability as I am. And what I noticed was that they're actually willing to listen to me when I wasn't trying to change them and make them wrong all the time. And so they just see me now as a resource. If they're interested in something or if they hear me working on a project, they're way more likely to ask me about it and be interested in it. And then I can share with them because they want to know, as opposed to me always trying to make them be interested in what I'm interested in. And the last myth that I struggled with was because of the urgency of time, where all these different things were piling up and I was learning about all of these financial, social, and environmental issues that exist in the world. It really felt like, oh, we don't have time. We got to fix these now. And so I would get louder and I would try to talk to more people because I thought that that's what it took. And again, the truth was that when I did that, I just turned people off faster. People didn't want to be in a dialogue. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. And I was probably doing more harm to my cause and to my advocacy than good in the long run. And what I realized was that instead of lying and say these aren't urgent issues, which I still believe they are, I still think we have financial, social, and environmental problems that we need to address. And because they're urgent, what I need to do is stop doing anything that turns people off and really strategically focus my efforts on the groups of people that I can influence and do all the things that I can to meet them where they are to make a difference. So I need to get more efficient, more productive at my advocacy, not just get louder and do more of it. And so what I want to help you do is really quickly give you a sample of what it looks like to use that multiplier effect, to talk to somebody who's going to have an influence, and their network is actually going to make a huge difference in the world. And so what I suggest, it's not the only way to go, but I tell you this because I've had a lot of success compared to the past, is that I pick the cause that I want to work on. I get very specific, and I even pick the very specific behavior that I want to see. The more specific, the better. I don't try to get people to believe every single thing that I believe, but I look for the things that we can work on together where we can change something in the neighborhood or in the community, in the city, in the state together. And they may have different reasons for it, but I always look at what can we do that's positive. And then I pick the groups that I want to influence or that it's going to require. So I work backwards and I say, what large networks of people, what groups, what businesses, what nonprofits need to buy into this for this to be successful? And then I really prioritize them and I say the first groups that I need to talk to have a direct impact. They directly support what I want to do, and they're the most likely to join. They're usually probably the nonprofits or the government agencies or the businesses that this is what they do for a living specifically, or the products they sell. And I focus on those first, and I make a list, and I write out all these organizations, and then I write a second tier of organizations that indirectly want to support what I do. They're probably not, say if I'm going to tell you and show you a video soon about transportation. And so they may not be a transportation organization, but a lot of green building organizations and sustainable development groups support transportation initiatives because it's a piece of what they do. And so you could go to that group next and start making a list of all these organizations that work in that industry and that might support you. And then last is just a marketing benefit. A third group of people or a group of organizations that would see their clients or their customers caring about this issue. And so if they were to support it, they would be associated with it and get a good marketing and PR benefit from being recognized. And so that's the priority and the order in which I go. And that's because it takes you longer if you don't go in this order. If you get the direct and the easy organizations involved first that obviously want to support it, then that's going to influence the indirect groups because they don't want to join something that's not directly related to what they do. It's hard for them to convince their board of directors or their staff to participate. But if they see a growing organization or coalition of groups that already support it, it's more likely for them to be able to sell it. And they'll say, yes, it's an indirect benefit to what we do, but look at it, it's a great thing to be a part of, and then they have a reason to jump on board. And then those marketing groups, the groups in the businesses that see the client or the customer benefit, they want to see an even bigger coalition because they're trying to get marketing value out of it. They may support it, yes, but to actually spend marketing dollars or to put their logo behind something, they have to know that they're going to get recognized. And so doing it in that order really saves you time and energy in the long run. But you don't go talk to that organization just, as a buckshot approach, people like to say, with no strategy. You want to look inside each organization, tier 1, then tier 2, then tier 3, and you want to look at who are the individuals that have a strong voice already, who are the leaders, but who are very even-keeled and they're kind of neutral. They're not looked at as a radical one way or the other, but they are a strong leader. Don't hurt your cause by going to the easy person who you know is going to jump on board, because if that person is really gung-ho about your project, but people see them as really kind of leaning far one way or the other, they're not going to be a strong advocate inside that group to go sell the idea to their organization. You want to find someone who's worth the time to go have coffees with, have a dinner with, and to share your project in a really powerful way and let them know what you're up to. And it's going to take some work to do it that way. But if you take the easy route and try to take someone who's going to be a quick sell, they're not going to be the strongest advocate inside that organization to get them to buy in. And so that's why I would go backwards and work with organizations in those 3 tiers and then pick the individuals that you want to talk to in that organization to make it work. And so I'm going to have, as an example, Minetta, don't show the video just right away, but I'm going to show you a really small, it's small compared to some of the stuff that we're doing now, but when I was younger, this was a really big project. The first thing we did was we got this idea for a video and a photo shoot so that we could recreate this really famous transportation photo from Germany, but do it branded for our city in Des Moines, and go use that for all of the transportation organizations in the city to run big marketing campaigns to let people know why it's important to invest in biking and bus infrastructure for public transportation and for reducing congestion in the streets. So we got DART, which was the bus station, Des Moines Area Transit, the Bicycle Collective, Drive Time Des Moines, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization. They were in our tier 1, and they were just obvious supporters because they worked on congestion and they were biking and busing organizations. Once we had that small coalition on our planning team, we were able to go to the city office for a permit to close down the street for 2 straight blocks, and they saw that we had a lot of local organizations already on board, so they rushed our permit because I was young and I didn't realize there was a 3-month wait, and so they rushed that permit for us because they knew that we had some really good organizations involved. And then we got Center on Sustainable Communities, which was a green building and residential green building organization, and Meredith Corporation, which had a lot of employees downtown, and they really supported with their sustainability committee biking, busing, and walking. So they're really good tier 2 type organizations. And with that growing coalition and a lot of great organizations behind us, we're able to convince professional photographer to come take the photos for us, some videographers from the local community and from the local college to come take videos of the event because they knew they would get recognized, and then 2 local green building architecture firms, one RDG and one Modus, which was actually an engineering firm, because their clients cared about transportation issues and were often trying to design transportation and public access into their properties. And so we wouldn't have been able to get all those people to do things for us for free had we not shown them that we had this big coalition of organizations behind us. And I can tell you that it was absolutely essential that we got the free video, the free photos, and then the Modus and RDG money, because we had to throw a giant party. It ended up being 105 degrees that day, and we were asking people to go out there in bikes and buses and shuffle around in really hot, humid weather. So they only really came out because it was a cool event, and we had promised them food and drinks at the local establishment called the Continental, and we even had a local band, the Nadas, come and had their front man play acoustic guitar for us in the corner. So it was a really cool party, and we needed it because it ended up being a terrible, terrible day to do the photo shoot. So I'm going to let Minetta play the video that just shows the end result of what we were able to do because we prioritized how we approached it as a project.
So folks, Adam's going to be on mute for a moment, and the video is going to get pushed directly to your site. After it gets pushed to your site, then you'll control the volume, the size. If it's not streaming, that's all on your computer. We won't be able to control that. Just be alert to the fact that you'll control the YouTube video after it pulls up on your screen. And then at the end, I'll close it and we'll unmute Adam.
So the video is just really to show you, to want to break up the presentation, and to show you that got really, I mean, I say thrown together in about 2 months is when we had that project. And I would say that that is some of just naivety, being young and not realizing that it takes a lot longer to get permits and just moving ahead anyway and seeing if people would help us. But also that we took a really, really strategic approach, and it made things, it shrank the timeline for what we were able to do. And had we not gone in that order, we would have had a lot of problems. And it was a very successful marketing campaign, and all of those agencies use that photo. And we have been, in the last 5 to 6 years, we've really seen an increase in bike lanes, in reduction of traffic accidents, in increased bus ridership, and just a lot of awareness about the organizations that help people if they want to learn and get into bicycling, or if they want to start taking the bus, or if they want to do rideshare programs. It was really multifunctional, and it helped us. So it wasn't just a photo, it was a leverage point that we could use, and it really, I can say that that photo is beautifully framed with the state capitol in the background, and people know it's Des Moines, Iowa, and it's been shared in magazines and on Twitter and Facebook by some really big organizations around the world, which we didn't really expect. But the old Germany photo, if you've ever seen it, is fantastic and original. But it was very grainy and hard to see. And for us to recreate it and have a really, really nice high-def photos of Des Moines, it's been replicated since then by a lot of other cities. And I'm not saying they saw us do it first, but they definitely saw the value in doing it for their own city, and we've got a ton of use out of it. So that's what I would say, and I want to stop for questions just in case before I go on. I'm going to talk about working with individuals, but I wanted to see if you have any questions about prioritizing who you work with and in what order you go out and talk to them, and then why I said to choose the types of individuals that I said to choose. So if there are any questions, type them into the chat box, and I'll have Minetta go ahead and ask those for me.
You can put them in the chat box, or if you're a Twitter fan, you can send them to hashtag SLPS Thursday. Either way, we'll make sure Adam gets your questions.
And Minetta, since we have, I'm going to try to have a little time at the end.
Oh, it says impactful photo and campaign Adam shared. More of a comment.
and Minetta. I'll go ahead and if they type in those questions, we'll get the last bit of the presentation done and we'll open it up for full question and answer at the end. Does that sound good, just so we make our 5 o'clock?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. So the last phase is really what Dr. Corliss in Milwaukee at the UW said to me yesterday. He said, know your audience. And I really want to emphasize that there's a ton of good things out there about how to talk to different groups of people, but I really want you to know your audience on a one-on-one basis, and that's kind of unique about, it's the only reason I would write a different book, because there's a lot of good books out there about framing messages, but I'm talking about framing messages to a person, an individual that you're trying to convince of what you're advocating for, and there are 3 stages of influence that people go through that I'm going to walk you through, and they're called contempt, curiosity, and commitment. And if you can recognize and meet them where they are, you can provide them with only the information they need to move forward into the next phase. And it can save you a lot of time and energy. And again, it's prioritizing so you don't burn out, so that you do the most effective thing, and so that it's not emotionally difficult for you to handle all of that. Because advocacy is a strong workload. So the first stage, contempt, is exactly what it sounds like sometimes and not at all sometimes. So I want to give you 2 examples of contempt because the word means 2 different things. It's not always hate and anger. Contempt sometimes is very passive, and it's just a lack of awareness about something. For instance, if you're in contempt of court, you can be a real jerk and get thrown out, or you can be consistently warned because you don't understand the rules of the court. You just don't know that there are certain things that you don't know. And so people are in contempt if they're just very unaware of a particular topic. And if someone's in contempt, then there's only a few things that are actually ever going to be receptive to, and it's important for you to know what those are. One of the easiest things for you to do to recognize this is to see what kind of questions they ask if you're talking about a topic. If they're saying why, why would I care about that, or why would you work on a program like that, or why did I hire you, bringing me these kind of ideas, that is a good sense that they don't even really see a purpose behind it. So they're saying, why would I do that? And it's not, at that point, really great to send them a bunch of information about removing barriers and here's how we could do this project. It's to just back way up and show them something that is working. Show them a successful example of what you want to see, the change that you're advocating for, the type of program, the policy, the new, like we said, if you just want a photo for marketing, or if you actually want a business to change and implement some of the initiative, show them someone who's already doing it. Because without pushing, without trying to convince, just get them exposed to it, and that could look like a tour or a sketched up drawing of a building that you want to see done, or a video. And it can't be very salesy. It can't be a really inflammatory documentary. It just has to be letting them know that something exists, almost like a model airplane. Showing them something and just letting them look at it for themselves and saying, okay, well, I get it. I see now that this thing exists, and now I'm curious, stage 2, of how this works. Maybe it's not the same as mine, and they'll shift what they're actually interested in. But if you can show them that this is possible, show them that something else has been done successfully without being very pushy and turning them off, then they're going to be required to readjust their thinking that this isn't something that people do, or it's just not possible where you're from. And it's really important for you to realize that they're in contempt for a reason. Typically, they're actively in contempt because they're committed to something else, and this seems to be in opposition to that. So you want to not just push forward and be pushy because they're going to think that you don't care about something they care about, or that you're just completely unaware of something that they care about, which is sometimes just as bad. And the fear is that, why would they go do something if they're going to get tricked or duped into somebody doing something with a hidden agenda? They're going to be really sensitive to looking at those demonstrations or those models or those examples of somebody doing something successfully. So that's why you don't want to mix it with some big rationality of why it needs to be done. You just want to show them that it's possible and let them look at it themselves. In stage 2, well, I'll back up. I'll give you a really quick example. I know that we're closing in on 5 o'clock, but urban farming and school gardens and urban agriculture is something I'm very passionate about. And I can tell you that it was a surprise to me. I thought that we would have really amazing things happening, and we probably were, and there were some really great things happening that we actually had to pull from to show people examples. But when I moved to Iowa and to Des Moines in 2008, we really didn't have a lot going on. And what we found out was we went and talked to a lot of the community. People didn't really see gardening, and definitely not urban farming, as important because it was really perceived as a hobby for rich white people, for soccer moms to do if they didn't have anything else to do. And that's not right or wrong. That's just what people said. It's like, why would we want a community garden? That's not really making a difference in the community. So what we were able to do is go get photos and have people speak and really highlight these gardens that people didn't even know existed, that were at schools, that were at churches, that were in community spaces, and they had these really strong ties with the food pantries, with the food bank. They were funneling lots of produce in and feeding hungry families and feeding hungry children. And in so doing, we created an annual conference called Hope for the Hungry that brought the local hunger organizations together with the local food organizations, and they shared simultaneously what both of them were working on, and it just spurred all of this collaboration. And now we've got 26 school gardens, a dozen church gardens, over 10 community gardens in the city, and it keeps growing. Now we have an urban farm up in Ankeny. And so that is something we were able to do just by showing people that they didn't really get why we would do gardening. They realized then that it could actually be a cure for hunger, which we have a big hunger problem in Des Moines, and it shifted them, and they were suddenly curious about how do we, or like what do people use gardens for? There are 3 questions in the chat box. Minetta, do you want to do those now, or do you want to do those at the end?
Up to you. I just was wanting to make sure you're alert to time because 5 p.m. is a hard stop,
Yes.
just out of respect for other people's time.
Yes. Well, let's get them at the end. The second is curiosity, and in curiosity, like I said, that you've shown them something that makes them reconsider their previous stance, and they're going to start asking questions like, what is this all about? What are these gardens for? Like, what is this project, going to do for the community? And the best and most ideal way is then to start sharing information. And that's only because they're in a curious stage where they're asking for information. And the thing that you want to avoid is sharing information that from sources that you're interested in, but think about that person and say, what sources of information do they want to hear from? My boss was always, very vocal about, he was the vice president, he was vocal about his stances on things, so I didn't send him, links from news sites that I liked. I sent him links from news sites that he liked. If it was, papers and research, he was an engineer, and so I sent him more technical type of information. He loved videos and photos, so I'd always go and sit with him in the office, but I always made sure I wasn't sending him something that he would consider too far out of left field, or not from something that he would actually see as a reputable information source. And if you can do that, then they're going to start to be interested and ask for more, and they're going to move on and start actually applying it to, well, if this is a good idea, what if we did this in my city, or in my family, or in my home, things like that. And so the third stage is commitment, when someone actually says, I want to make a change myself. And the thing that looks like is they've gone through seeing that it's possible. They've gone through getting more information about that topic, and now they're ready to make a change, and they start asking questions to begin with. How would that look in my life? How do I get a hold of some organization to help me? How do I overcome these obstacles? And the strategy you want to use at that point is shaping. You want to remove barriers that get in their way. You want to help them brainstorm if they come up against something that they're struggling with. You really want to help them find incentives at that point. But all of that you're providing would be useless if they were in the curiosity stage or in the contempt stage. So So you really want to deliver to them in this particular category the strategy or the approach that works best, which in this case is shaping. And so you can look at some of my work with businesses is that there's the partnership downtown, which is the Chamber of Commerce for all of the chambers of commerce locally, and they have environmental impact awards and incentives, and they're really just trying to showcase the best practices of other organizations so that that can help other businesses overcome their objections. They can say, well, that's great that this other business is doing it, but that doesn't save us money. But they can go to our website, they can check out the best practices and see how it saved other people money. And we've taken that same approach to a statewide initiative where we founded the Iowa Sustainable Business Forum. And again, it's a best practice sharing 50C16 that lets professionals come and meet other professionals and share what's working on sustainability topics, what's not working, how can we partner together to make some of these things move forward on energy, water, and waste, and social and community initiatives that we care about. And that's because they're already interested, and so we're able to shape their path and just provide a facilitated platform for them to share what's already working and what's not working. For businesses that aren't at that level, they don't make good members for our organization, and it's clear that we know that. And so that is the 3 stages: contempt, curiosity, and commitment, and I want to leave the last 9 minutes for questions. So Minetta, hit me with them, and I'll answer them as fast as I can.
Okay, folks, we're going to go rapid fire. So if you have questions for Adam, get them in the chat box or in the Twitter, hashtag SLPS Thursday. We're going to start with the ones that are already in here. We've got one, says, I missed the big picture of what you summarized as the first group of people to approach. I'm going to give you a couple at a time, Adam, and then you can answer them strategically. Do you feel this sort of this picture or hands-on experience is a much more effective means of making the importance stand out in the minds of the audience? I'm going to give you one more, and these all came in together when you solicited questions at the first round. What kind of carrot do you use to get an initial conversation with an individual from a large, influential organization? Let me know if you want me to repeat any of those.
Yes, 3 at a time is going to be tough. I try to write them down. So I'll work backwards and say the first, what I use as a carrot is that it's easier for me because I've built a large network, and I really encourage you to continue networking in your entire career as an advocate, is that I just let them know who I am, and I tell them, here's what I care about. I don't tell them the details of the project. I tell them what I think the project will do in the city or in the state. And so, for instance, I don't talk about water quality, and in Iowa, when I go out to large organizations, I say, I'm committed that farmers and environmentalists work together to come to solutions on water quality, which is true. I do have my own preconceived notions of what that will be, but I'm always open that I'm wrong. And so I share with them that here's what I want to see, which is collaboration, working together on a topic that all Iowans, I think we're consistently #1 is the water quality is the one issue that we care about. So I tell them I'm committed that environmentalists and farmers work together to solve water quality issues, and I'd love to talk to you about it and see where you think I can make a difference or where we can share some ideas. And that's true. And it helps me, 1, remember why I'm going to the meeting, but 2, that they don't see that I'm trying to convince them of my side of the story. Because some people just say, well, I don't agree with that. I don't want to spend time scheduling a meeting with that person. What was the second question, Minetta?
Moving from bottom up, the next one is, do you feel this sort of picture or a hands-on experience is a much more effective means of making the importance stand out in the minds of an audience?
Well, I wish I could be face-to-face and ask a little more probing questions, but the quick answer is yes, if I understand the question. What I'm sharing with you, I think big picture, I wouldn't share it with you if I didn't think it was going to make you more effective. There are other things that I think if you just take out that one piece about making it stand out in the minds of an audience, there are compelling stories that make, you should really tell your own stories. I've been telling my story, but I've been asking for your story. Because if you can share your personal story, that's powerful for people, because it's not a stance. It's just saying, hey, here's what happened in my life and here's why I care about these things. That moves people, and it's a really loving place to come from, because you're just saying, here's what I've experienced and this is why I care. But I would say that storytelling plus really good videos, really good powerful photos, all those things are not the most important thing, but they can help your cause stand out in the minds of other people, where just discussing and having dialogue and conversation alone won't make it stick in their minds. So I hope I answered your question. And the first tier, the other question was, what is that first tier? The first tier of organizations is they have a direct correlation. They want the exact same thing as you. So we wanted to get these photos about biking and busing and how that compares to cars. So we went straight to the biking and busing organizations. And it was also about traffic congestion, so we went to the groups that worked on traffic congestion. So that first tier is always, what's an organization that wants the exact same thing you want in the community, and this is a great project. Maybe they want to even own it. It's your idea, but you want to hand it over to them and say, hey, I don't have to own this idea, I just had it, and I want to work on this project with you. And it's a great way to get easy buy-in from organizations right at the beginning. So that's tier one. Tier two is related indirect benefits. They want the same thing, but they don't actually work on that as an organization. A lot of environmental and social groups believe in the same things. So if you're a bicycling group, you probably like local food, but that's not what your organization actually works on. It doesn't mean they wouldn't throw some support behind it, or maybe want to give a little bit of money or send their volunteers your way, but they're not a direct supporter, as their mission statement would read, of your group. So that's tier one and tier two. Minetta, other questions?
So this is getting close to last call. We might be able to take a few more questions, but if you have a question, it's important you get it in the chat box or tweet it out to us. One that's come in while you were speaking, Adam, is what was the statewide initiative of best practice sharing called?
Yes, it's called the Iowa Sustainable Business Forum. And it literally started we did a research project all last year, and we launched with 5 founding members on the last day of December. And our first events are coming out in May of this year. Not that we haven't been doing this before, but it wasn't an official 501c6. And we modeled off of Wisconsin and West Michigan. Actually, Michigan has about 3 of these. Because the Iowa forums that did exist, when we went out and talked to the businesses wanting to do sustainability, we found that they were hesitant and actually a little, you could say, afraid to go out and speak in public about what they were struggling with, because if you go to a public forum and tell people what you're struggling with, some organizations use that against you instead of trying to help you fix the problem or to work on an initiative. They use it to talk poorly about you. And so what we're trying to create is an initiative for the companies who do want to do good things to have a safe environment to come talk to other professionals who have their job and say, we've been trying to do this initiative and it's been hard. What do you recommend? How did you guys find success doing this initiative? And then be able to get help doing that in not a public setting. And so that's what a 501c6 and how they're different from a 501c3 organization looks.
Okay, sorry, we have a little bit of an echo there. This is last call. We've got a couple more that have come in. One is a comment. This was one of the most influential presentations I have seen from the series. Thank you. And then a question. When it comes to projects that involve working with other people and whatnot, how would you suggest keeping everyone engaged and motivated?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you that I'm only now getting good at this. I'm a terrible micromanager because I really think that I hold a lot of pieces in my mind and I have to see that they all fit. But sometimes you just have to let go and ask people to get engaged in what they care about. So keep in mind what your big picture is, and just because the project goes in one direction doesn't mean some of your volunteers might want to have a side project, or they might want to go work on something else. People will only stay engaged if they feel like they get to contribute and they're in the creative process. People don't like to show up usually and just be told what to do unless you're really going to share your vision with them in a really powerful way and take the time to train your volunteers or train the people that are part of the initiative, because it takes training to inspire people, and if they're not inspired, they're not going to do work unless they're able to participate in deciding what that work should look like. So you have to really, I think, let your volunteers make decisions and run with their ideas a lot of the time. And sometimes that's hard because you think it would be better a different way, but that's my recommendation of keeping people engaged. Lots of communication as well. Don't ever let people think that no work is being done. Over-communicate the work that is being done by other people. That's it.
I think we're doing great on time. I mean, Adam, it's like you planned it. It was perfect. Okay, with that, we have a thank you so much from Joslyn. They're thanking WasteCap and Adam and all the staff that put this event together and all the folks that have participated. We always report our viewership numbers. Well, we always report the tentative viewership numbers that people report in before the end of the day. We're at 86 confirmed heads and eyes watching. Plus maybe some in Omaha, so maybe that's 88. So great, and we have several thank yous coming in. So with that, Adam, thank you. And I'll let you take closing remarks as soon as I tell everyone that our next SLPS, first Thursday of the month, 3:30 to 5, being hosted by MCC. Actually, it took me a moment. The MCC's up, and so we hope to see you there. And with Adam, I'll let you have closing remarks.
Well, I mean, that's it. I hope that everyone, if you want the book, we talk about this and a lot more. It's on Amazon. It's a Kindle right now, but I just think that one of my passions and what I advocate for is that if you're an advocate, don't burn out, don't quit. We need people like you. Like I said, whatever you're advocating for, even if we don't have the same exact same beliefs in what you should do, I want you to be successful because you care enough to be an advocate. You're going to make your community better. So I want you to be sustainable in your advocacy. I want you to leverage your emotions, avoid burnout, and influence people. So I'll do everything I can on my website, in the comments, I'll follow up with emails to make sure that you get success that you're looking for in life and in your communities and in your state and in your country, around the globe. I want everybody to basically go out and change the world for the better. And so if you're doing that, my hat is off to you. I'm eternally grateful, and if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Thursday. And you know what, actually, though, if anyone's still here, because I feel like there's a lack of closure. We always do applause, but it's hard right now because we're really spread out. So right now, we'll applause. We had a lot of electronic connections this time, so that's great. Okay, thank you, Adam, and everyone have a great Thursday. We have wrapped up. And Adam, if you'd like to stay on for a minute, you're welcome to chat with any of the participants. I'll unmute them now.
Yeah, sure. I'll be here for as long as we need.